Hello friends, Tanya here with a video featuring a bunch of Spellbinders products, including two stamp sets that just came out this month. Windy Sky, which is a background stamp, is what we're going to start with, and we're also going to use a stamp set called Cute Boots. I'm going to start out using one of my favorite techniques, and this is ink smushing with some Distress Oxide inks. I believe I used Stormy Sky and Speckled Egg and Salty Ocean. Now I just have a cutting mat as my work surface, and it does work great to smush your inks on and pick up. I'm using some plain, I think this is 100-pound cardstock, white cardstock, and I smush that down and pick up most of the ink and then dry it with my heat tool. Next, I'm going to take this background stamp, which is about 3 3/4 inches wide and 5 inches long, and we're going to stamp it twice on this background piece of paper. This is cut to 5 by 8.5, I believe, or 5.5 by 8.5. It's just a half of a sheet of cardstock. I am making sure to liberally apply my powder bag there, which is just cornstarch in a sock to help with the static, because we're going to heat emboss this. I'm going to ink it up really well with some VersaMark ink, rub that with my microfiber cloth to add a little slipperiness there, and I'm going to ink it twice to make sure I get a good coverage with the VersaMark ink. It's a little tough to see, and this piece of paper is pretty warped. We'll fix that later, but it is pretty warped. And now I'm going to stamp it a second time on the other side, and I did add a little piece of washi tape behind that to keep it in place, since I can't put a magnet over the part of the cardstock that I've already stamped with VersaMark. Again, going to stamp it twice to make sure we get a nice solid image. And then I am going to use some Hero Arts White Satin Pearl embossing powder on this cardstock. It adds a nice pearly look without being overwhelming. It's very subtle, and it will show the colors through the embossing. And you can see here I have a little gap between the stamped images. That's okay, we're going to cut this into 2 panels to make 2 different cards anyway. And you can see the embossing magic as the heat tool melts the embossing powder onto our cardstock. I do love the White Satin Pearl. It is one of my favorite embossing powders, and you'll see me use it a lot. I don't know about you, but I love embossing so much, and I've been stamping for almost 2 decades. Maybe it is 2 decades. Anyway, I have an entire drawer full of embossing powders, but there are a few that I reach for over and over again, and the White Satin Pearl is definitely one of them. I pulled out the Hemstitch Essentials rectangles to die cut this particular panel out. I didn't use the Hemstitch part, I just used the rectangle die to get a nice even rectangle. I'm going to add a little bit of coaster blank on the back, and that's going to take care of the warping. Now I'm pulling out the Cute Boots stamp set. Excuse me. I'm pulling out the Cute Boots stamp set, and we're going to stamp this with some VersaMark, and I'm going to try to stamp this with the Brutus Monroe Night Shift embossing powder, which is gorgeous. It's a black embossing powder that when you tilt it in the light, you can see another color come through. However, the problem with this particular embossing powder is it tends to leave, let's just call it some confetti of color. No matter how hard I try, I tend to get little speckles of other colors. So, take 2. I'm going to do this, I'm going to stamp it again, only I'm going to use the VersaFine Onyx Black and heat emboss it with clear embossing powder, just because I wanted a cleaner look. there are ways you can use that embossing powder to great effect, but this was not one of them. I used another rectangle from, I don't remember which die set. It's one of the Spellbinders die sets, probably the Essentials rectangle. And now I'm going to take a piece of, I think this is Basil cardstock. It's the cardstock that comes in the Spellbinders card kit of the month. I frequently cut those down, or I was cutting those down into panels to use as a layer. And now I'm going to use this empty container, well, basically an empty container of Perfect Pearls in Perfect Pearl, and add a little water to that because I want some shimmery spatter. And this is one of my favorite ways to do it. I had inked that panel of Basil cardstock with whatever blue was on my blue blending brush. And that no, this is me inking the inside of the card. That's right, I forgot where I was. I inked up the background stamp very lightly with the Stormy Skies, no, the speckled egg ink, and then lightly stamped it on the inside of the card. I do have a piece of coaster blank on the back of this layering panel. And now I'll add the heat embossed and smooshed panel that we created, centering that on the layered panel, and we'll add the sentiment to the front of that. And I thought I was done with this at this point, and then later you'll see me add some more things to it. Now we're going to move on to a second card. We're going to throw in a little bit of foiling on this particular card. I've got a piece of white cardstock. I'm taping the Glimmer Hot Foil plate and deciding to the cardstock. And now I'm deciding if I want to use Opal or Moondust, because both of these seem to match the color scheme that I've created. And I'm measuring the die. I need a 5-inch long, roughly 5-inch long piece. This is a Slimline hot foil plate. If you use it twice, it'll cover an entire Slimline card panel. This is just a 5x7 card panel because that's the size of card I'm going to create next. And I decided to go with the Opal, which just adds this iridescent tone-on-tone color or foiling to your project. Now with this particular foil, it's hard to tell which side is the side you want down. Well, when you're unrolling it, here's what I do. I don't have pieces laying around. I just cut what I need and then use it immediately. That way I know that I've got it the right way. So I've got my heated up platform. I run this through the die cut machine to get my foiling, and let's be honest, I let this heat on the platform for probably half an hour. I kind of forgot about it. So we have a lot of extra overfoiling on this one, but as you can see, you can brush that off with a dry brush pretty easily. So now I'm going to pay closer attention to my timing, and I'm going to do the other half. Now this isn't this is a shorter panel than a Slimline panel. It's only 7 inches long, and a Slimline panel is anywhere from 8.5 to 9 inches long. But this works out great. It's a little narrower than that 5x7, but that's okay. We're going to make that work. Here is that cute boots stamp set again, and we're going to stamp the girl and we're going to color her. I'm using some, what is this, Hero Arts Intense Black ink on some Nina Solar White. I do remember to show you some of the colors, but only at first. I'm sorry. I don't remember to do this as I get more involved in the coloring as I go along. She's going to have a yellow rain jacket and some fun yellow boots, and we're going to add some yellow into the umbrella. I'm trying to stick with all the coloring for one color at once. I don't maybe do that all the way through. This is the light blue that I'm going to use, and the teal that we're going to use later. I do color her dress the light blue, and there's some fun polka dots in there, and I tried to make those a darker color. That didn't quite work out. And I decided to do some fun stripes on this rainbow, well, that's partial rainbow, on this fun umbrella. I'm going to start with the yellow, and since I have 4 colors, I'm doing every 4th stripe. There's only 5 stripes, so the yellow gets repeated once. I'm adding a little bit of a darker tone in the middle of each of these sections of the umbrella and going back with the lighter tone of each colorway. And I started with the yellow, and the next stripe is the teal, and then the blue, and then we're going to add like a periwinkle purple, just a little extra pop of color there. And those blues and purples seemed to coordinate with the Distress ink smushing background that I had created, and that's where I picked that color palette and threw in the yellow as a quick fun extra boost of color. Going to add a little bit of purple to her socks, and we'll get to her skin tone here in just a second. E11 and E13. My E11 really needs to be, I think it's the tip, I'm not sure, but it's darker than I think it should be. And now I'm going to fussy cut this stamp. I really am growing to be okay with the fussy cutting. Not every stamp set has to have a die, although if it's there, I'll buy it. I just will. But fussy cutting, don't be afraid of it, guys. I did speed this up to 2 times the normal speed. I didn't speed it up more because I didn't want to make y'all sick with all the spinning and turning of the paper, because that's the secret to fussy cutting. Go slow and turn the paper, not your scissors. I do like to leave a little bit of a white border. I don't like to cut right up to the line, especially finer detail lines, because it just doesn't ever work out for me that well. I'm not the greatest at the fussy cutting. There are some real masters out there. I'm not one of them. I'm just going around and trying to have a fairly even white border. That white border gives you a little fudge room. I am going to come back and cut out in this very tiny spot. You don't want to do those little tiny spots when you have a lot of cardstock in your way. It can really be a recipe for disaster. So I'm going to layer on the ink smushed background. I did not die cut that. I just trimmed it to 4.5 inches wide across the front of the card, this portrait oriented card. Now I'm going to use some Brutus Monroe embossing powder here. This one's called Blizzard. It's not currently available, but it's in my stash and I love it. It's a mix of like a cobalt blue and silver. So if you have those 2 colors in your stash, you could mix them yourself. Now I'm using the scored and pierced rectangles from Spellbinders from my stash. After I created these cards, I went to see if they're still available, and they are not. However, any rectangles will work that you have that'll fit around this, and we're going to layer this onto a 5x7 card base. I solved the it didn't quite reach all the way across issue with the Glimmer foiling by trimming that panel down, and by adding this piece to the center all the way across instead of completely framing an image or a panel, so that you would not miss out on all of the fun foiling. We're going to glue down our little raincoat girl, and she isn't quite where I need her. I did pop her up on a little bit of coaster blank also. I did link my source for coaster blanks in the description box below for those that are wondering what the heck I'm talking about when I talk about coaster blanks. I do get that question fairly frequently. They really are just undecorated pulp board that is lightweight, literally like the coasters you get in the bar, and you can get them on Amazon. These are some new gems that are self-adhesive from Spellbinders. They have 3 different mixes. They have a silver mix, a clear mix, and a gold mix. And this is the crystal mix. When I say clear, that's what I meant. And we've got a, I don't want to say this is milky, but it's, it seems just a little bit milky, but it's a clear crystal and like a rainbow iridescent crystal. So there's 2 different colors and 4 different sizes for each of them. And for this card, I used the more milky one and have the all 4 sizes. Now inside, we're going to take the girl in her raincoat and umbrella and stamp that in, oh, what is that? I don't remember what color that is. It's one of the 3 colors I smushed with, like the middle tone. And, oh, Stormy Sky probably. I stamped the girl and the puddle, and then we're going to use the VersaFine Onyx Black and this cute sentiment that reads, oh, I have to look at the card. When life gives you rainy days, wear cute boots and jump in puddles. I love that. One of my kids' favorite activities was to jump in puddles. In fact, they had specific clothes that they were allowed to wear to jump in the puddles because we live in a sugar sand yard. And you would think that that wouldn't stain things, but boy, howdy, does it ever. So they had to wear their play clothes to jump in the puddles. Now I'm moving on to the next card. This time I am using the Windy Sky background again, but I am applying the Distress Oxide inks with my blender brushes. I had seen someone else do this. I think it was Nina Trapani. Not positive, but I think that's who it was. And I like the idea. I frequently use my sponges or blender brushes to blend out the edges between 2 different colors if I've inked the stamp with 2 different colors. But I've never used the blender brushes to actually apply the ink to the stamp. We're going to give this a try though. I had inked it previously for the other half. Now again, this is another, oh, I don't know, probably 5.5 by, no, this is a 5x7 panel. That's right, because we're making a 5x7 card. And I'm going to try to get these stamped images as close together as I can. So you watched me open and close the lid to try to make sure it's all lined up. And I'm inking it up with a combination of the ink pad directly to the stamp and with the ink blending brush to not only smooth out the edges between the color transitions, but also to apply some ink. And I had thought I was going to add some of that bright blue salty ocean at the bottom edge, but decided not to do that. And I do ink this up twice. I maybe could have got away with one, and there is still a pretty clear delineation between those 2 stamped images, but we're just going to go with it. I pulled out the April large die of the month, which is a Slimline die, and I cut that at a diagonal. I also used the rectangle die from, I think it's Deco Blooms. There's another, I'll have another video featuring that very soon. I did stamp both of the umbrellas from the Cute Boots stamp set, and I did that still with the Hero Arts Intense Black ink on some 80-pound Nina Solar White cardstock, and I'm coloring it with just purples and blues, and we're going to do a little blend between the purple and the blue on the folded umbrella. And on the expanded umbrella, I'm using the purple on the lower band of the umbrella, and I'm using this sky bluish color B04 and B02, and I think the purple I used was BV01 and BV04, I think. I am going to work on getting sketch markers for all of my Copics because since I do so much videoing, it's nice to have the caps visible. Then I don't have to try and remember so hard. I can easily show you which markers I'm using, especially if I leave them end up in a cup. What do you think about that idea? Leave me a comment about that below. I do add a little blue to the end of the handle, and now we're going to do a little C8 to add a little gray to the extended handle part. Now, when I opened that marker, you saw it rain a little marker juice onto my cardstock. I lucked out; it didn't land on any of the image that I'm going to need to use, but by taking both ends of your marker off, you're going to avoid some of that spatter if there's some glooping involved. Now on that shorter, or the collapsed one, you see that I started with the darker of the color at the shadowy area, and then I blended out between the two different colors. I think I only used 3 markers, the lightest of the blue and both tones of the purple, and then I fussy cut those out. I didn't think I'd make you do that twice. I am using the Sakura Jelly Roll pen in the Stardust color, and I'm just adding a few details to the umbrellas. I think that really adds a really nice touch to your colored images. I did put a little bit of coaster blank behind these also, and I'm using these amazing reverse tweezers from Spellbinders. They've got really pointy tips, and they have an extra strong hold. My other reverse tweezers, which are decades old, they have a nice squeeze, but they don't squeeze as tight as these do, so I like that good firm grip. I'm just playing with placement of these umbrellas here, and I have to trim off some of that coaster blank. I like the coaster blanks for so many reasons, but one of them is that they aren't that sticky foam, so I can adjust things easily. I can peel them off if I need to. They're not going anywhere, but yeah. Now we're going to pull out, so that was finishing up the first card we made. Now I'm going to add a little glimmer to this third card we're making. I pull out the Moondust foil, and since I don't have the Spellbinders trimmer for foil, I use my metal ruler and my cutting mat and an X-Acto knife. The trimmer system they have would be super amazing. I just don't have it. I started with 2-inch wide strips for this particular glimmer plate, but since I'm doing this funky edge, you're going to see me struggle just a smidge. I'm lining it up. I'm going to use the hinge method, and I try to do that with the 2-inch wide strips, but I didn't like how that looked, and I maybe should have just stuck with that method, but I didn't. I end up taking the foil and the plate and laying them on the cutting mat. Here I am trying another version. Why did I leave all this in here? Maybe so you can see me struggle. Yeah. I'm still trying to figure out how I can see the edge and not have to cut the foil. Well, I did end up cutting it. I put the foil down on the cutting mat, and I laid the plate on top, and then I'm just going around the plate with my X-Acto knife. And this actually works really well. I'll have to do that with the other end because this plate is like, I think it's 5.5 or 6 inches long. So not quite as long as I need for this panel, but it does repeat easily. I'm going to do a little patchwork here, and honestly, you cannot tell I did a patchwork on this when I foil it, because when you lay the foil over the foil, it doesn't cause any weirdness, which makes me happy. Just going to carefully line that up. There's an indentation or a embossing mark from the edge of the die that we used that makes it super easy to line up this plate. So I'm going to get that all lined up to my satisfaction, and I'm going to add some tape to hold it in place in a couple of spots here. And I'll lay that on my heated up panel and push the timer and then run it through my die cut machine. And it's stuck to that pretty good. It's pretty dry and staticky at my house today. And then I take my trimmed piece. Oh, here. See those little rippled edges on the outside edges of that glimmer plate? They line up with those other, with the previous glimmering. So you can line up those lines and have a nicely spaced, perfectly spaced line if you want to make this longer. Because it was designed for slim lines also, especially to coordinate with the large die of the month die set, which is set up to be used as a slimline. And look at that, we're going to use it in a slimline length. Since it does cut an 8.5-inch long section, I took a piece of this iridescent mirror cardstock from Tonic. This is the Marina Mist, and I cut out a 3-inch wide section because I figured that's about what I would need. And I am gluing the already die cut panel that we have stamped and foiled and die cut, so this coordinates. There just wasn't quite enough contrast, even with that beautiful embossing on the edge with the dots on it, which you can barely see with all the stamping. I'm going to take this same rectangle frame from the Wistful Windows or Deco Bloom die set. They both have the same external rectangle die that fits a 5x7 card, and it has these little rounded corners, which I love. I happen to get the new Spellbinders gold speckled cutting plates that are exclusive to the Spellbinders shop, and I'm using those as my new plates because I didn't want the mirror cardstock to get any funky impressions on it. Now we're going to take the I suppose it's Sheets of Rain image from the Cute Boots stamp set, and we're going to stamp it in VersaMark on the upper left corner of this panel, which is also a 5x7 card panel. We'll cut it down with that same rectangle die here shortly. And I am going to sprinkle this with some clear sparkle embossing powder. This happens to be fairy dust from Brutus Monroe, but any clear sparkle would work. I wanted just that shiny quality on this embossing. And then we're going to take, let's just enjoy the embossing. I know I've shown you a lot of embossing, but it never gets old. And you can see the sparkle. And now we're going to cut that out with that same rectangle die. Just carefully making sure that I've stamped enough of those Sheets of Rain. And then we'll test fit that. I did add coaster blank to all of the layers on this. And I'm going to adhere the furthest back panel first, so the one we just did the Sheets of Rain on. And then I'm going to glue on the panel with the stamping and the iridescent mirror cardstock. Just going to line that up carefully with the previous panel. I could have glued these together, but it makes it a little tougher to get them to adhere evenly when I put them under the Misty for that weight. I could have added a coaster blank or something just for spacing, but here's what I did. And then I had cut this this same sentiment that we used on the first card, the second card, that I'd stamped twice, and I die cut it with a different rectangle. This one's probably from the scored and pierced version, or the one of the other retired rectangle Spellbinders kits. No, not kits, just sets. Now I'm taking the Silver Mix gems that just came out, and I'm adding a scattering of those. There happened to be an extra tiny of the more matte gems stuck to the back of my packaging insert, so I used that right away. You can't really tell the difference because they're not close enough together, and I added that fun scattering. So inside, I'm not completely happy with the inside of this one, but the theory was to put I think this would work with another card. It just doesn't match very well with the outside of this card. It's too in your face. But I took this umbrella and I'm leaving it upside down. And I'm going to have those sheets of rain dropping into the inside of that umbrella. I used Stormy Sky and Salty Ocean on the umbrella and did a little blending with that. And then I used the Weathered Wood for the rain. Using the VersaFine Onyx Black to add the sentiment over, just over part of the stamping. And I'm going to add a little more of the sparkly Stardust Sakura Jelly Roll pen here to the rain. And here's a close-up of that. I hope you can see some of that sparkle. I really like how that card turned out. It feels kind of sophisticated. Here are all three of the cards I created in some stills, so you can get a little bit closer look at them. I really enjoyed playing with different techniques and creating 3 cards that were at least similar in color theme. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do that now. It really helps me build my channel. If you're interested in any of the products that were used in this video, check out the description box below, loaded with information there. And if you have any questions, leave me a comment. I try to answer all of them in a timely fashion. Until next time, bye-bye.